All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Experience. Welcome back, guys, to season 4, episode 2. Today, y'all, I have a very special guest with me. As y'all can see, I'm grinning, I'm smiling because this has been an episode that I've been waiting on. This is somebody that I've been waiting to have on the podcast, and a lot of my other guests have recommended to have on the Black Experience podcast. So he's making his appearance today. He is a member of the Western community and the Bellingham and Whatcom community as a whole. And most importantly, y'all, he is the Sheriff of Whatcom County. So let's put our hands together and let's bring up Sheriff Tanksley. How you doing, Sheriff?
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. How's your day been so far?
You know, it's been a busy day, which every day is a busy day, but I wanted to make sure that I took some time to be part of this experience and just have a chat with you.
Absolutely. I can't even, we're in dead week right now. So we have dead week and then finals week. So I feel busy, but I can't imagine as a sheriff. I mean, taking a look at your calendar is probably just everything's just booked up. So
Well, everything is by the calendar for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, even this meeting was on the calendar. So, yeah.
What's funny, Sheriff, is I've had friends in the past, roommates, where, like me personally, I if it's not on the calendar or if I didn't write it down, I would just forget about it. I've had friends where they could just memorize everything, any events, just in their mind and not have to write it down. So I'm like, is that just like a personal skill that they have or something like that, you know?
Well, perhaps maybe they just have to remember a few events.
Yeah.
Instead of like a whole day of events. One event might be an hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, different locations, drive time,
Yeah.
walk time.
Yeah.
So,
Something
yeah.
small, nothing too
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Sheriff, again, it's been an honor to have you on this podcast and to get going. I would love to start on if you could just explain a little bit on your background a little bit and kind of where you grew up and then what life looked like for you growing up.
Sure. So I'm Donnell Tanksley, the Sheriff of Whatcom County, the 38th Sheriff of Whatcom County. And I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And my mom had me when she was 15 years old. And unfortunately, she committed suicide at 16. And I was raised by my aunt, who was just a year older than her, and grew up in a single family environment with my cousin, who I called my sister because it was in the same house. 600 square foot apartment, shotgun apartment. And really just went to school, started working at 15, joined the Navy at 17.
Wow.
Right after graduation.
Goodness.
And at 18, I was in the Persian Gulf. And so I was in the military, in the Navy. And after I got out of the Navy, I went back home to St. Louis and lived in a town called Ferguson, Missouri. In fact, I lived in the same apartment complex which Michael Brown was killed.
Wow.
Just many years earlier, but the same exact complex. I lived there at the same age he was when he was killed. And I went to St. Louis Community College in Ferguson, and then later joined the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department based on an experience I had while I was a student in Ferguson, Missouri. So based on a bad experience with the police, in fact. So that's what kind of led me down this path.
Yeah. That's, first of all, I'm really sorry about the loss of your mom at such a young age. I mean, that is heartbreaking, but I can see that your aunt really stepped up and took her role in that. So
Thank you.
absolutely. By the way, before I know how I said you were the sheriff of Whatcom County, but you're also the first black sheriff of Whatcom County, the 38th. I mean, when you hear that and when you feel that and when you won the race to become sheriff, how did that feel?
Well, the sheriff's office is 170 years old. And winning this election is more than just about me. And I'm elected by the people. So essentially, I work for the community, all communities, every single person, every single neighborhood. So for me, it's a lot of responsibility. I take it very seriously. I don't take it lightly. And I think about my responsibility every day and every hour. So it means a lot. But again, it comes with a lot of responsibility, and I'm up to the task.
Yeah. Was kind of like, so when you were growing up, I'm kind of go back to that. Was being a cop, because I know like all of us when we were a child, we all have like a either a job or a role or a superhero we want to become when we were growing up. Was being a cop or being a sheriff ever, well, like, did you have that vision growing up, or did that come later?
The vision came later, but starting in about maybe seventh, eighth grade, I did tend to watch some law enforcement related shows on television. But it wasn't later until I was actually living in Ferguson, Missouri, and having a negative experience with law enforcement that really kind of put me over the edge to become a professional law enforcement officer.
I'm curious, what was I guess if you want to dive a little bit deeper into what was that negative experience that you had growing up in Ferguson with law enforcement?
Sure. So the Cliff Note version is that my buddies and I, we decided to go horseback riding in a couple counties away. And as you know, when you're 19, 20, trying to get 6, 7, 8 guys together to do anything on the weekend early in the morning is a hard task.
Oh yeah.
So we finally accomplished, hey, on this particular morning, let's go horseback riding. So it was 2 car loads. This was pre-affordable cell phone. So pretty much, 2 cars, and then you just follow each other. And so we're about 2 counties away, and about 10 in the morning, I was the lead driver in the lead car. So I decided to exit to get something to eat. And I remember when I exited, actually before I exited the freeway, a police car passed in front of us. And I do recall that. So then we went to the restaurant, and maybe an hour later, getting back on the freeway, about 4 or 5 police cars pull us over. And the reason was the police officer said that I failed to use my turn signal getting off the freeway.
Right.
So he was pulling me over for an equipment violation, actually a moving violation that he said happened an hour ago. And in Missouri, traffic is criminal. So when you fail to signal, when you fail to stop at a stop sign, all those things you can be arrested for, not just cited.
Sheesh.
So it's criminal. So at any rate, so we're on the side of the interstate. Everyone's out of the car. We all had driver's license, but they pretty much forced us to search the car. It was an illegal search of the car. They called us the N-word, said we shouldn't be in that area, and it was horrible. And in fact, a few years ago, I wrote an article about this experience, and I would suggest your listeners read that article, and it's called "It's Past Time for the Two Americas to Come Together." And part of that, I was thinking, doing that interaction on the side of the interstate, gosh, at some point, there has to be a better way, to do this.
Yeah.
Has to be a better way. So you can't see a violation an hour later, pull 2 cars over, and use that as pretext for searching a car. In fact, at one point, he said that the address on my driver's license, he arrested a person that lives on that block for crack cocaine. We're talking 40, 50 miles away. So it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
This address, you arrested someone. So I asked, I said, so, sir, if there's a burglar on your block, does that mean that the the whole block are burglars.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, so you are smart A-N.
Wow.
You're a smart A-S-S-N."
Yeah.
That's what he said to me. And that's when I knew that this was much more than about allegedly failing to use a turn signal in a vehicle.
Man, Sheriff, that is just terrible. I mean, I've never experienced something like that.
Yeah.
But my gosh, I can't imagine being 19 with your friends and you guys are trying to have fun going on this road trip, and then this happens. I'm assuming like the rest of the trip was kind of just it was like it was a major vibe killer. Like it probably wasn't the same. I'm assuming, right?
Well, we actually never completed the trip because during the encounter, of course, they ran all of our names and information in the system. And one of the people that we were with had a warrant for failure to display fishing license.
So the license wasn't credible.
Well, apparently this person was out fishing, and the Department of Conservation stopped him, asked him for his license. He had one, but he didn't have it on him, so they wrote him a ticket. He actually paid the ticket, but they put it in the system as if the ticket wasn't paid, so he had a warrant. So he was arrested on a warrant that shouldn't have been a warrant because it was paid. So then we had to travel back to St. Louis to find his receipts and all those different things to bring him back to where we were originally stopped, to that jurisdiction. So we never finished the trip. In fact, I haven't went horseback riding or attempted to since.
Feel like you're still kind of traumatized by that event.
It does bring back really bad memories. It does.
Now you said this is after an hour after the turn signal situation happened. So I'm assuming then he was pretty much following you guys for the entire hour, or did he like ring in someone and say?
No, my assumption is that they waited for us because we went to a restaurant to eat.
Right.
And then once we finished eating, we got back in the car and then continued on the trip. So there wasn't any stops between the restaurant and then getting stopped. So my assumption is that they waited on us. But he called reinforcements.
Wow. So there's like three other cops.
No,
with
it's
him.
like four or five other
4 or 5
cops.
other cops. Goodness, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the inspiration for the
was.
article, was it a book that you said that you wrote?
No, that was the inspiration to apply to the police academy,
Gotcha.
which I did.
I find that interesting because, Sheriff, I feel like for most people, maybe if they experience something negative like that, especially as a black man with the cops, that you would want to do nothing with the police. But your mindset was more so, hey, I want to actually be a cop, a sheriff, be a part of this so that I could then change
Yeah, I mean,
this happening.
I think it's important that oftentimes change comes from within. However, we do realize that one person can't change it, But even now and even then in law enforcement, I mean, although I believe those officers were wrong, I believe they were unjust. But the majority of law enforcement officers are out here doing the right thing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy for, some bad apples to spoil kind of the rest of the apples, or at least from an outside perspective, be like, oh yeah, I had one bad experience with a certain cop. That means all cops now must be that way.
Yeah, I mean, I will say though that experiences are real, and individual experiences, For example, and this is just a very simple analogy. So if one goes to the dentist and has a really bad experience, you know, it might make you apprehensive about going to the dentist. If one has a bad experience with law enforcement, whether it's a personal experience or an experience a family member may have had or something you've seen on television, then you might be apprehensive in any situation with law enforcement. Or you could say, well, I don't want people to feel that way, so maybe I'll be a dentist, you know, or maybe I'll be a law enforcement officer, or maybe I'll do something associated with the criminal legal system. So I think there's a way to, you know, be part of the solution. Yeah.
Being sheriff, so I'm assuming, I guess, what was the journey like leading up to being a sheriff? I'm assuming being sheriff wasn't the first thing that you did. You probably were like a cop and then maybe a lieutenant or something like that. What was that process like?
Sure. So I spent 21 years at St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, and I retired in 2014 and came here to WW as the assistant chief of police, and learned a lot, worked with a lot of students, faculty, staff. Students will teach you a lot. And so I worked here for 3 years, and from there I went to Portland State University as their chief of police for about a year and a half, and Blaine opened up the chief of police position in Blaine. So I applied, and it was a national search, and I was selected. So I came back to Whatcom County and worked in Blaine for 4.5 years. 4.5 years in Blaine as a chief of police. And the sheriff of Whatcom County decided to retire. So I put my name in the hat, and I competed, and the voters voted for me
Wow.
in majority.
Yeah. Congratulations. Because
Thank you.
I heard about you winning, because I know Russ Whitby,
Yeah.
who I had on the podcast. He was running for city council. And sadly, he didn't win, but I heard him and you were the two black candidates, at least, on the ballot. And obviously, we wanted both y'all to win, but
Yeah.
we're just as happy that you won take, so.
Well, I mean, I will tell you that I take my hat off to anyone that's running for a sheriff, running for city council, running for student government, just putting yourself out there to run for anything, I think is commendable.
When you found out that you won and that you were going to become sheriff, can you describe that feeling of what were you feeling? What was going through your head?
Wow. So I would say the first day, my opponent was leading. And then I went home and I didn't look at it. I didn't look at the results again. And I thought that, well, it's the will of the people. And then my campaign manager, I'll just let that person call me. And then that's, it was either the next day or the day after. I mean, right now it's kind of foggy because it was really intense. But my campaign manager called me, who happened to be a student here at Western. And he said, "You're in the lead." And then I won. So just knowing the responsibility, it's a big responsibility. So just for me, it was very emotional. So I kind of had to take a minute by myself and just kind of reflect. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a big position, and as you should, you should celebrate yourself a little.
Yeah.
I usually like to do that myself too. When I, let's say, on a smaller scale, but like when a few years ago, we made a team as soon as we were back on campus,
Sure.
in person, intramural co-ed basketball team, and we started off the season really bad.
Yeah.
But then eventually we won the semifinal game, and then in the final led to the playoffs. And I mean, I still remember that feeling of like us winning that championship.
Yeah.
We were all we were like wearing masks and everything
Yeah.
too. So we were like, how did we do it? You know what I mean? But
Nice.
it's like a thrilling type of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely. What I guess like now that you're sheriff here in Bellingham, staying on this topic, what are kind of like some hopes that maybe you have for the viewers out here who are like, okay, now this is the sheriff of Whatcom, this is the face. What hopes do you have that you want to achieve, or are there anything that currently that you are achieving or want to achieve being sheriff?
Sure, absolutely. So, one of my goals is to increase the resources with regard to homelessness, with regard to mental health awareness, autism awareness that deputies have. Currently, we have two behavioral health deputies that are co-responders with a therapist, and so they have specialized training. One of my goals is to make sure that every single deputy within the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office has the 40-hour crisis intervention certification. Right now, in order for them to achieve that certification, we have to send them to places such as King County, Thurston County, Pierce County, Clark County, Spokane County. And the training is great. The one issue with the training, though, is when you do train in those particular counties, you learn about the resources in those counties. So when they come back to Whatcom County, they're trained and they have the tangible skills to deploy, but it's the resource part that they don't have, particularly to Whatcom County. So, in fact, just last week I had a conversation with the representative of the Criminal Justice Training Commission for the state of Washington that oversees the program for crisis intervention training. Mm-hmm. So, in the coming weeks, we're going to have a kickoff meeting to discuss how we could have that program here in Whatcom County.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I still remember you you spoke at for Black History Month a few weeks ago. You spoke at the event at Hotel Leo. Is
Yes.
it the UPC event, I believe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How was that?
It was great. And I mean, one thing I can say is as the sheriff of Whatcom County, I'm trying to avail myself to all the different communities here in Whatcom County, whether it's in Everson or Linden, downtown Bellingham, South Whatcom County, Kendall, all the different places. So it's going to be very busy.
Sheriff, what are some things from now that you're a sheriff and you're in that role and you see things from that perspective? What are some things that before you became a cop, before you became a sheriff, that I guess that you want the public to know? Because I'll be honest, ever since I mean, I've personally, like, you know, I respect everyone, whatever job you're doing. Ever since 2020, when George Floyd happened, Ahmaud Arbery, just like we were talking about before, happened, Breonna Taylor, so many countless names. When you became a cop, I guess, what are some things, you know, when that happened, I was more so like, man, like, you know, do cops really have our best interest in mind? And I'm just being honest. Now that you're a sheriff, I guess, what are some things you want the public to know about cops that maybe that they don't know or don't speak of?
Right. Well, certainly I don't want to, and it's not my intent to speak for every law enforcement agency around the nation. But what I can tell you, particularly about agencies in Whatcom County, is that they're highly trained. And we emphasize equality. We emphasize being just. We emphasize being truthful. We emphasize using the least amount of force necessary. And not only do we emphasize it, we train on it, and it's within policy as well. And then we have policy review. We have use of force review. So all these different things. So I would say that it's a continuous learning experience, not only for the public, but for our law enforcement officers. We have to make sure that we're being honest with the public. We have to make sure we're being truthful. And there's a social expectation that the community has with law enforcement. And that social expectation or social contract, if you will, is very fragile.
Yeah.
It's very fragile. And it's been breached before.
Mm-hmm.
It's been breached. And because of those breaches, if you will, that's why it takes a while for some people to trust someone wearing a uniform. And I understand that, especially coming from the experience I told you about and others, coming from experiences we've all seen too many times, and and just talking with people. So for me, it's about letting the community know that I'm going to be 100% with you. And if there's an issue, let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the table. But do understand that there's been some breaches in the past. And it's important for us to, and when I say us being law enforcement, to recognize that. And, you know, sometimes walk with people at their pace, not necessarily the pace that we want them to walk at in terms of understanding and being a partnership and with law enforcement.
Right. Right. Absolutely. That's a good, yeah, that's a fair response, and I really respect that you're seeking that vision, because I think that's the vision. Because ultimately, I'm also with you, Sheriff. It's like ultimately, we got to work together. We got to be
Yes.
together because we're all in one community, right? And we can only go so far if we're just like this.
Yeah. And, that's why I also encourage people, for example, at the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, we have a community academy. In fact, we just started one last week, and it's 12 weeks, and it's from 5 to 7, or no, 5 to 8, and it's free. It's here, available to everyone in Whatcom County. And I think we have maybe 30 participants right now. And I believe 8 or 9 of those participants are from WCC, so they're students.
Yeah.
So I encourage folks to learn about the law enforcement agencies in your community. Certainly, anyone can reach out to me if you want to know more about the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I mean, it's about education, education on both sides.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now that you're sheriff, do you get any kind of like special treatment when you're walking into a restaurant, or any kind of discounts that maybe us citizens don't get?
No. So it would be unjust to take any type of gratuity. So certainly, I think right now, maybe my name is more recognizable than my face.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So in fact, I used a card just a couple of days ago, and someone saw my name on the card, and then at that point they made the connection, not necessarily the face. So I mean, it's a very unique name here in Whatcom County. So I think the name recognition is there, not necessarily the facial recognition.
Yeah.
But as far as like freebies or things like that, not doing it.
No?
Not
Not even
doing
like
it.
a free donut or something like that?
Not a free donut, maybe a cup of water or something like that. But no, and honestly, no one has extended those offers to me, but there's no need to. I'm just a community member, just like you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a generous response, so
Yeah.
I definitely respect that. Speaking of donuts, I know we talked a little bit right before the podcast about the history of the whole, because I asked Katie Potts, the chief of police at Western, but if you wanted to just explain a little bit about the history of the whole donuts and coffee and cops liking that a little bit, and where that originates from.
Yeah, so it originated from like the 40s and 50s. And at the time, in the middle of the night, if you wanted a cup of coffee, most of the gas stations and restaurants were not 24 hours, service. So the only place, even in small towns, that were open at 3 o'clock in the morning was your local bakery.
Yeah.
So a law enforcement officer would stop by the local bakery and chat. But during that chat, they would have a cup of coffee inside the bakery, and then probably have a donut or two. So I believe that over the years, if you happen to pass a bakery at 2, 3 in the morning, you would see a cop car. And that's where it came from. That cops like donuts, which I don't think is wrong, but I think most people like donuts.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite donut yourself?
Just probably like a glaze
Glaze. Classic.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like my donuts with the sprinkles, the strawberry sprinkle ones.
With the candy?
No, not with the candy. It's like a strawberry like frosting, and then they add
The frosting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one with the hole.
Yeah. I do prefer a warm donut.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But for that, I guess sounds like I might have to be up at 3 a.m. To get the fresh donut.
You might.
you know. I kind of want to tie things back to what you said initially about the story, about your experience with those cops when you were 19. Now that you're in kind of their shoes, meaning you're on their side of being in law enforcement. I guess, have you seen, differences? Have we come far? Have we made progress since that incident, and you being sheriff now, from those situations kind of still happening, but I guess at a lesser rate?
I think as a profession, we've made good strides. I still think there's work to do. For example, many agencies here in Washington State and many in Whatcom County have taken a course called Fair and Impartial Policing. And in fact, I was an instructor for Fair and Impartial Policing. I taught officers in Blaine, officers at Portland State, and not many, but some agencies up and down the I-5 corridor in Fair and Impartial Policing. In fact, about a year and a half ago, I taught 3 classes at Skagit County Department of Corrections. And really, Fair and Impartial Policing it's about knowing that as a law enforcement officer that we have a duty and an obligation to be righteous and not to overuse or misuse your power and privilege, right? Mm-hmm. And it also talks about different biases that we all have, but how to ensure that those biases doesn't dictate behavior.
Right.
Right. So I think we've come a long way, but I certainly think that we still have to train. We still have to listen to our community. We still have to involve our community in our different law enforcement agencies, whether it's with hiring, whether it's being part of some police departments have oversight, some police departments have insight groups, just making sure that different departments are open to their community.
Well, because the thing is, like, everyone has a bias, right?
Sure.
But I guess when you are behind that uniform, you're like, yes, I'm aware I have these biases or maybe stereotypes about how a particular person might be, but it's really to put that aside and be like, okay, let's be fair. Let's look at the situation kind of rationally, right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because when you talk about biases, and in fact, you and I had a conversation before that today I'm not in a uniform. Some days I'm in a uniform, but even how people treat me in and out of uniform is different. And I don't know if that's a bias or just a recognition of the uniform. So I'll say that when you think about individually how we look at people and when we look at how we judge people, when we look at preconceived ideas, when we look at, to some extent, what we were taught by elders, by parents, by things we were taught growing up, some of those things could be untrue about people. So then as an individual, we have to understand that we all have those biases, but to take the time to get to know people. Take the time to get to know how different ethnicities do things, uh, how people grew up in different cultures, different neighborhoods. People eat different things. People speak different ways. So just all those different things about people. If you just learn about people and be willing is the key. Willing to learn about different people and know that at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters.
Yeah, because it's one thing to be a bunch of people that are different cultures than you,
Yeah.
and just be like, oh yeah, I'm just doing it for the credit or just to do the time or whatever, spend the time, whatever. But and walk away not really knowing anything because you kind of just had a closed mindset versus,
Sure.
like you said, being willing to, oh, that's interesting, learn about this food or that food or this clothing style versus that, this
Yeah.
culture. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the same way. I mean, growing up, I'm originally from Eritrea in East Africa,
Yeah.
and so I mean, coming here was getting to know all these different types of cultures was a shock, but it was fun. It was
Yeah.
fun learning about it. So, Sheriff, to kind of wrap things up, man, from your experience and from your perspective, I'm curious, what advice would you give to the younger generation?
Well, first I would say stay curious, and explore. And the second thing I would say is make sure you ask a lot of questions and don't be afraid to ask those questions, but also be willing to answer questions. Be willing to answer questions. And if you tie all that together, I think if you're curious, if you're asking questions, if you're willing to answer questions, then I think that expands your opportunity to learn. That expands the opportunity for people to learn more about you. That expands opportunities to just know more about the world. So I would just say stay curious, ask questions, and be willing to answer questions.
And I've never heard that one before. I've always heard the ask questions, but not the be willing to answer questions part. So
Yeah.
that's good.
I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I personally don't even think about that, but now that you said it, I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is important to answer questions as well. 'Cause
Yeah.
people could always learn from you too.
Sure.
So, absolutely. Well, Sheriff, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, The Black Experience, taking the time out of your busy day. Is there any last minute shout outs, anything that you want to throw out there that you want the audience to know before we close out?
Absolutely. So I would encourage, if you're interested in law enforcement, to go to the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office website, and we have different jobs that people might be interested in. Of course, being a deputy on patrol, being in corrections, we have jobs in other areas as well. But definitely, if you have any questions, reach out to me personally. And my email and contact information is on our website. So definitely want to get people interested in law enforcement.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, there you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This one has been special, and I've been excited to do it. And so I hope you guys took away from the advice, the lessons, and the experiences that Sheriff Tanksley shared with us today. Stay tuned for more awesome episodes on the Black Experience as Season 4 rolls on, and we'll catch y'all on the next one. Till next time, guys. Peace.